So hi everybody, I'm here with my friend and coach Kelly Painter, in my quest to help you guys play longer in life. I want to start doing some segments where I can give you some tips on things that you could be doing on your own to help your tennis game. And I worked out with Kelly in the past, and he showed me trigger points. I had heard of what that was, but I was really impressed and amazed at how they work. So I'm going to let Kelly explain, first of all, what they are.
Okay. So a trigger point is where there's pre-programmed areas on every muscle that when it gets overstressed, it locks up to protect the joint. So there's two main ways this will happen. One is overuse, which is what we see a lot in tennis, and then a trauma or acute trauma where someone might fall or get in a car accident, and the muscles lock up, like in the example of like a car crash, whiplash. The muscles are locking up to protect the spine, and then the muscles don't let go because there may be some trauma or damage there and the body's kind of creating a self-cast. But how that would apply primarily to tennis is overuse. So I'll talk about a couple specific ones that I always come across with tennis players, especially when they start getting over the age of 30, 40, they start having a lot of repetitive stuff. Mm-hmm. But the thing to understand is that a trigger point is actually a good response when you have an injury, because it's basically the body telling you to stop using the muscle. Now, a lot of times it gets confused with inflammation or some type of itis, say arthritis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they'll think like I have, too much bursitis in my shoulder. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it's the muscle structure is not working properly and it's putting stress on the joint.
Okay.
So you may have some inflammation there, but if you don't address the muscle structure, it's not going to get better for very long. You may get some like cortisone shot, feel good for a little bit, but it's not going to heal the issue.
So what you mentioned something, it's not inflammation, it's a trigger point. So how do you find the difference? Is there a different kind of
Well,
pain?
I would say this, is that there could be inflammation there. That could be a factor. But in most cases, the trigger point is the main issue. And if you resolve the trigger point, it seems to go away. That's how you'd know. Like, so if I did a trigger point session with you, or you did a trigger point session with yourself, and the pain decreases, then you know that's not an inflammatory response. Okay. And I mean, inflammation is an issue, obviously, in our day and age now, but it gets thrown around a little bit too much in my eyes, that you need to start addressing the muscle structure. Another key mistake people make is when they do trigger point or stretch, they go to the affected pain. Mm-hmm. Now in trigger point, a lot of time it's referred pain. So meaning, a common one I get is people in their low back. They think, oh, my back is tight, my back is weak, my core is weak. Most of the time, it's the lack of function in the hip that's putting stress on the back. Oh. So when you go to do trigger point, how I know that is when I treat the area where they say the pain is, mm-hmm. they don't feel much, maybe a little discomfort. And then I get into their hips and they're like jumping off the table because it's very painful there, because that's where the dysfunction is. So the mistake people commonly make is they'll go to massage therapists, or they'll stretch their back and they'll try to do all these things around the back to make it feel better, and they're not addressing the core issue. And that when the hips get released and start functioning again, the back pain's gone. Another common one is the shoulder.
Yeah, I had that because I had an old injury, but you and I talked about it, and it's probably scar tissue. Probably
scar tissue, and then also there's a pattern when you have a injury from the past where the muscles lock up to protect that area, and you have to keep massaging basically to get that trigger point out. But a lot of times people have pain here in the front, so they treat here, but it's the rotator cuff muscles in the back.
So
because they're not stabilizing the shoulder like they're supposed to, because they're weak and tight. And so then all this stress is getting put here, and that's where these muscles, some of them connect. So you feel the pain here, but you got to treat back here.
Okay.
And
so basically, you're looking for the root.
Yeah, exactly. Like I do what's called brushing. Like I'll use, this is a more expensive tool. This is probably about $600 for this. You don't have to go this high end, but I work with a lot of people, so I need something that not only has a lot of power, but it has a rechargeable battery because I go through them. But what I do is called brushing. So I'd be brushing around the area, and they're giving me feedback on where there's pain. And in most cases, when I get around to the back, that's where the pain is.
Like,
so the body's going to tell you. The pain's going to tell you. So yeah, they might feel some release here, probably very little. But when I get into the areas, could even actually be an inner bicep muscle too. But
cool.
I'm going to take a couple simple examples of things that probably most of you might be familiar with and feeling. So what other?
What would you say the main areas are? I would, if you were to ask me, I would say my hips bother me, my shoulder bothers me, and then I guess my back.
Yeah,
I would like the most common.
Hips and shoulders. So as we age, those are the most mobile areas in the body. Yeah. So the more potential for dysfunction. So I mean, you can just imagine like all the motions that the shoulder can do, the hip can do. The knee is a very linear, it's not supposed to rotate. And that's another thing, when the hips aren't rotating properly, people tend to rotate at the knee, and that's not a rotational joint. So that's why you get a lot of knee pain, is because the hip isn't functioning. Same thing with down the ankle and the feet. So those two areas, the hips and the shoulders, strength training, trigger pointing, keeping mobility in there, that's probably the most important.
That's what you want to do, huh?
Yeah.
So why don't we do this? Let's split it in upper body and lower body.
Okay.
So we're gonna let's cover a couple of things on the upper body and then a couple of things on the lower body. So today, why don't we cover one part of your upper body, and then in the next episode we can cover another part of your upper body.
So I'll hit one upper body that may lead into a lot of common stuff down the arm and into the neck. So it's the rotator cuff muscles. Everybody's heard that term. They don't necessarily always know what that means. It's a lot of muscles that create stability in the shoulder.
Okay.
I'll speak in general about a tennis stroke and what I kind of see.
Yeah.
You can speak more directly on the actual stroke. So for instance, when you're hitting a forehand, they're supposed to lead with the arm and the hand, right? So what you'll see, and you could probably attest to this, that a lot of shoulder forward and a lot of shoulder up.
Up, yeah.
So that's because the rotator cuff muscles aren't strong enough and or have trigger points in there that they can't stabilize the shoulder through the shot. Same thing with an overhead. Like the shoulder should stay in the socket, but because they lack the strength and have trigger points, the shoulder comes out and puts stress into the neck and the trap. So by opening up you can do obviously strength training exercises for your rotator cuff, which is why the trigger point is happening. The muscle is getting stressed, so it's weak from just aging and not strength training appropriately. And then playing, how many hundreds of reps are you hitting, especially when you drill or something like that, over and over and over, and that muscle is fatiguing and trying to lock up, and it's just rotating forward, creating problems.
Especially if you're doing it the way you said, that you're basically repeating a bad motion. How is the shoulder supposed to rotate?
Well, let's just take it in the sense of a forehand or an overhead, is that the rotators, the small muscles underneath all the larger muscles, stabilize the humerus bone to keep it in place. Okay? And then the larger muscles, like the pec and a little bit of the front delt, are the force pushing forward. So you got a big muscle moving it forward and little muscles holding it in place. So basically that's what we want. I mean, yes, you could have tight pecs, you could have a lot of things going on, but the most common is the rotator cuff muscles are overworked, not strong enough. So yes, you need to strengthen them, but you need to release the trigger points. Now that can be hard to do yourself. I do have a bunch of tools here today that I'll show you. Some are expensive, some are inexpensive. I'm assuming that most people are wanting to know how to self-treat, right?
Yeah. So
once you distinguish the issue, which all you have to do is push around on muscles. When you find pain, that's it.
Yeah.
So probably one of the most inexpensive tools are these two to get at the rotator cuff muscles in the back, because obviously you can't reach back there yourself. And these are called, this one's called the TheraCane. This is a less expensive version that's smaller. I keep in my tennis bag.
Yeah, I have that one.
Yeah, so
it's good.
I'll use the bigger one because it's easier. So you can learn how to use this as leverage, but all you're trying to do is I'm on the scapula, like right now I'm on the infraspinatus. So right there's pain. So that'll be telling you you're at the right spot when there's discomfort. So I use
Maybe rotate a little bit more so
Yeah,
they
sorry.
can see your back.
Yeah.
I got it.
So
yeah.
here, so I'm
Yep.
using my right hand to stabilize the cane, and then I'm actually pushing across. I'm moving on the
Right.
trigger point. So that's a thing to understand what's difference between massage and trigger point. So when you get a massage, they move across the whole muscle, right? They're moving like they're massaging the whole muscle down. Trigger point is these specific points in the muscle. We get on them. We're not moving our finger across the skin. We're just pushing down into the trigger point because we're trying to get it to release. And there's many pre-programmed points. You can buy manuals online to really understand, like the infraspinatus runs across here, but there may be 5 normal points where
you
and
can
everybody's pretty much the same.
Okay.
We're not a unique species amongst each other.
Right.
So over the years they've distinguished what points to hit. But I can tell you this: if you find pain, you're in the right spot.
Okay.
I mean, that's gonna,
Right.
So this is a great tool. A really inexpensive version of this is a lacrosse ball. So I use a lacrosse ball because it's hard, so it's not going to give much. You can buy this for $5 in any sporting goods store. You put that into like a tube sock, and then you can do this up against a wall. So you'll go up against the wall, and you can move up and down with the sock and lean into it,
Okay.
and then move around just a little bit. So how you know it's getting better is that, well, I always tell people the first time you do trigger point, it's going to be the worst because it's the most tight. You're not used to that discomfort. So just know that it's going to get easier and easier and easier.
Okay.
Because if you go by the first time, you're like, I'm not doing this. This is painful.
Too painful.
Right. So you push into it. You want to do that for about a minute.
That was my next question.
2 minutes maybe max.
Don't overdo it.
Yeah, because there's no amount of overdoing as far as during your day. You could, you're not going to overdo, because when you have a pattern, especially if it's been around, let's say you've had a pattern for like 10 years, and I have that, clients will come in. Sometimes they just gotten this new pain. Most of the time, it's been around there for years. If it's been around for years, it's going to be stubborn. It's not going to let go right away. It's really locked in.
Yeah.
So you could do it many times a day. What I say minimal is first thing in the morning, last thing at night.
Oh, okay.
Because when you wake up in the morning, there's kind of lack of blood flow in the body. That's maybe when you start to feel your aches. And then through the day, I don't feel them so much. There's more blood flow.
Okay.
And then at the end of the day, it's kind of preparing you for sleep. And I like to have habits on the ends because they're easier. When you start getting busy in your day, you might not have time. I would say when you first start off though, and as many times per day as you can do it. Like I have some ones that tend to show up in my neck. So I'm at a stoplight and I'll stack my fingers.
Okay.
This is an important thing. If you're gonna use your hands, if you just push with the finger, you're gonna end up getting trigger points in your fingers because they're gonna get so stressed.
Pain
So
goes
you-
from one place to the next.
Yeah, you either stack your fingers like this to push in
Okay.
to muscles, or you support the thumb, like if you're going into your thigh or something
Yeah.
like that. So that's obviously the least expensive way.
And you basically want to stay there, right? You're
wanna
not
stay-
like going
pressure,
up and down.
You just keep pushing on it. And
Okay.
let's just say like when I first press in or you press in, the pain's gonna be like an 8 or a 9. Don't exceed that because you don't want to make it so painful you can't relax. Because while you're doing the trigger point, you want to be calmly breathing because you want to relax the nervous system. Because these patterns are programmed into your nervous system. So if you press so hard and you tighten up, you might at first, because that's a reaction, but try to relax, nasal breathe slow, and try to get the muscle to release. And if you push in and it's a 10, you're not going to be able to relax to that. So that's why sometimes when clients first start with their trigger points in their upper back, I tell them not to lay on the ground because that's your full body weight.
That's a lot of weight, yeah.
And it might be too painful. So you can do it up against the wall.
Okay.
So you can control how hard you're pushing into it. And then you progress as it gets less and less uncomfortable. Number one, you know that the area is getting better.
Okay.
Then you can start laying on the ground and using more body weight.
Okay.
So
to summarize,
yeah,
we got a couple of very inexpensive things that we can use.
exactly.
So I think I have a link to that on Amazon, and we're not being sponsored by this, but
Yeah, I can send a bunch of links.
Yeah.
All these things, the tools, except for my gun, I bought on Amazon. So, and
Yeah.
they're inexpensive.
Cool.
So
we
even
got a couple of
the
things.
yeah, lacrosse ball.
And then what? Couple minutes on the shoulder and like
yeah, there's
beginning of the day,
there's
end of
many
the day?
points. There's probably, so when you get people that have pain, anything above the shoulder, like volleys or serve,
Okay.
it's primarily this teres
that's
teres
good.
minor underneath the armpit. That would be one of the only ones that's difficult to get with these tools, and you're gonna have to manually do it.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm gonna have to bend down a little. I think you can still
Yep.
see me.
Yeah.
So let's just say it's on my dominant right arm, which is probably where it's at. You let the right arm hang down. You're gonna pinch basically this wing. It's kind of like the lat here, but there's other smaller muscles in there. You reach the thumb up into the armpit, and your other fingers are on the back side of that wing,
Oh, okay.
and just squeeze. This is probably the most common one I get, because people will tell me right away, they're like, I can't extend on my overhead serves. Or every time I do a volley, I even hit with this guy the other day. He was like 7 years old, great hit, but I could see from the baseline, anything up here, you just couldn't get his arm up. So I mean, if I was playing a guy
you
like
said
that, I would
the finger here and then
thumb
the
in
other
there, yeah, fingers on the
finger here.
outside, squeeze. Same thing, you can squeeze it and then just move across it, back and forth, back and forth, back
And
and
you're
forth.
trying to squeeze the front or the back?
The
front.
inside.
The inside, right here.
It's this muscle is kind of behind the scapula, so it's really tough to get at. That's why you
Oh, I
can't.
felt it.
It's
Oh
very,
my God, yeah.
It's very hard to use these other tools. They just can't penetrate in.
Cool. All right, so that's for people that have trouble with overhead strokes.
Yeah.
And then anything like a forehand.
Could be here, but it's probably more the infraspinatus, supraspinatus,
Here.
up in the upper back of the scapula. Like I
Okay.
said, ultimately, you might also even have, unfortunately, trap stuff here. You can squeeze the trap, and then it goes down into the neck, and that's where you stack the fingers and kind of push into here. If you have it here, it's because there's dysfunction here.
Yeah, yeah.
Just like with the low back.
Look for the root,
This is the
where it's
low
coming
back of
from.
the upper body. The low back is taking the stress because the mobile joint isn't functioning properly.
All right, so that sounds really interesting for the shoulder. So next week we're gonna talk about the elbow, the famous tennis elbow.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for listening, and make sure that you stay tuned for our next video where we're gonna talk about the infamous tennis elbow. All right, thank you, Kelly.
All right,
See
very
you.
good.